Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Rural Initiatives and Planning Advisory Committee meeting. Today is Friday, February 24th, and it's 1:00 p.m. and I will call the meeting to order. The first order of business is to elect a chair of the Rural Initiatives and Planning Advisory Committee for 2023. So at this time, I'd like to ask for a mover and seconder to open the floor for nominations or volunteers for the position of chair for 2023. Councillor Jones.
I nominate the warden.
Mr. Warden, are you willing to let your name stand for the position?
I've had a little experience with it, so yeah, I will do it. I'd be gladly do it if I have the faith of the committee members. And Donna has a vote on this one.
I'll have to ask, are there any other nominations or volunteers? Seeing none, I will ask for a mover and seconder to close the nominations for position of chair. Moved by Councillor Jones. Seconded by Councillor Widner. All those in favor? That's carried. Now I'd like to also ask for a mover and seconder to appoint Warden 𝗥𝘂𝗶𝘁𝗶 as chair of the Rural Initiatives and Planning Advisory Committee for 2023. Councillor Widner moves. Councillor Jones seconds. All those in favor? And that's carried. At this time, I will turn things over to the chair.
Thank you, Jenna, and thank you for starting us off on this new term. We are now at the approval of the agenda, I believe. So, does anyone, do you want to read off that?
Be it resolved that the agenda for the February 24th, 2023 meeting of the Rural Initiatives and Planning Advisory Committee be approved as presented.
Is there anyone interested in moving that agenda or moving adoption of it? Councillor Jones will move and Donna will second. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. The minutes of the last regular meeting, which were held on July the 12th, 2022, be adopted. Has everyone had opportunity to peruse those minutes? Is there any errors or omissions? I guess, Donna, it'd only be you and I who might know the difference.
Yep, I move.
Okay, Donna will move. Anyone care to second that? Mark? Okay, Councillor Widner will second. All in favor of adopting those minutes? And that's carried as well. Would remind members of the committee of any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Seeing none. And we have no delegations, which brings us to section 7, reports and briefings, and 7.1, we will deal with the Chief Administrative Officer on the 𝗤𝗂 committee overview and community grant program overview. So thank you, Julie.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Through you to members of the Rural Initiatives and Planning Advisory Committee. Congratulations on your appointments. Looking forward to working with you over the next year. We'll just share the presentation, which includes a committee overview. So I'd just like to very quickly run through purpose, some information from the terms of reference, what support we have in place for committee members, what you can expect, and meeting frequency. So in terms of the role of the Rural Initiatives and Planning Advisory Committee, the 𝗤𝗂 committee, as we affectionately call it, doubles as a planning advisory committee and was combined in 2016, in response to Bill 73 and changes to Development Charges Act and the Planning Act, which required that all upper tier and single levels of government establish planning advisory committees. So there are 3 members of council appointed to the 𝗤𝗂 committee, and a member or a representative put forward by the Elgin Federation of Agriculture. And so that's Donna Lunn, who's with us today. So the mandate of the 𝗤𝗂 committee is to promote the viability of agriculture and rural affairs in the county and across the province, to examine issues such as the challenges of global economy on local agricultural practices, the viability of schools in rural communities, and alternative sources of economic development in rural areas. As well, the committee's mandate is to develop goals and objectives to improve and promote rural life, to demonstrate County Council's commitment to delivering services to rural communities by recommending a budget to Council that will identify and accomplish those goals, to act as a planning advisory committee by providing information, perspective, and other recommendations to County Council on broad planning matters that have an effect on the county and or its local municipal partners. And that's on a as needed basis. And to review issues related to the county's official plan and or other development matters of significant interest to the county. So there are several links to Council's strategic plan and really no other subcommittees or working groups associated with this committee. So the terms of reference are published within Council's committee procedural bylaw, and that's available on the county's website. In terms of support, so there are a number of departments and that work together with the 𝗤𝗂 committee, engineering, planning, and economic development, as well as administrative and legislative services. So all of those staff who support those departments are available to committee members as resources. As well, there is a dedicated page on our website where members and members of the public can find more information about the committee's activities, including agendas, minutes, and other relevant information. So what you can expect as committee members is that we meet on an as needed basis, but it's generally more frequent at times when we are reviewing and approving grant applications. And I think this year will be a bit busier for the 𝗤𝗂 committee because there will be work associated with the 5-year review of the county's official plan, which you'll hear more about today. So at this point in time, I think there may be a couple of months where meetings are pretty close together. So 3 to 4 weeks apart. And then we'll get into a more regular cadence of once every other month and or on an as needed basis as issues arise. So next slide, please. Are there any questions about kind of that committee overview I've just provided? Are there additional resources that as committee members you may require that we could follow up and provide? So hearing none, I'll just jump right into the community grant program itself. So today I hope to provide committee members with a brief overview of the CGP, as we call it, including an introduction to the funding streams and eligibility, as well as a high-level overview of the 2023 applicants for both community services and the festivals and events streams. And then we'll dig right into committee allocations and those recommendations by stream, coming up with, if we're able to, a consensus with respect to how much the committee will recommend be allocated to each of those different streams. And then we'll identify next steps with your help. So to provide you with the CGP overview, Elgin County Council is committed to providing monetary assistance to eligible nonprofit organizations. So we have a policy that supports this, and it is a dedicated amount per household. So the 2023 value is $72,900. And this is support that is provided through the county's operating budget. And it's your job as 𝗤𝗂 committee members to ensure applicants are qualifying organizations according to the criteria that has been established. So each year we do see that the community grant program is oversubscribed, or we get more grant requests than we have monies available, which makes for a pretty tough job for 𝗤𝗂 committee members. So your careful review and scoring of applications does go a long way in making sure applicants are treated fairly. And we do endeavor as staff in support of the committee We endeavor to make sure that applicants are aware of the criteria and the fact that an ask doesn't necessarily equate a full contribution on behalf of the county. So grants are intended to provide modest levels of support and assistance to community nonprofit organizations. Next slide, please. So we do put a call out in the fall for any eligible nonprofit community groups whose primary focus is to respond to community need within the county. And we inform them that they may be eligible for up to 50% of their program service or event expenses, up to a maximum of $10,000. The community grant program, as previously indicated, does involve investment in two different streams of funding. One is for festivals and events, and the other is for community service organizations, both of whom we hope are responding to an identified community need and or building capacity and directly supporting council's strategic plan. So the goal of this community grant program is to support organizations and local service agencies with supplementary funding. So not fully funding anything, but supplementary funding that will strengthen their ability to be responsive, effective, and resilient as a local organization or service group. So there are two funding streams: community services, festivals, and events. And you'll hear this a couple of times through the course of today, because those are even broken down further into substreams. And again, funding isn't guaranteed, even if applications satisfy all of the eligibility criteria. So that again reinforces the important role of 𝗤𝗂 committee members in reviewing the evaluation criteria and ensuring that scoring is fair and equitable. Next slide, please. So organizations can also only submit one application per year, and it was determined by the previous Rural Initiatives and Planning Advisory Committee that if surplus money existed, so if we weren't oversubscribed and there was extra money available, then we could open up to a second round of submissions. That has not been the case over the last several years. So we do limit this to one application per year, whether there's one intake or two intakes. So I have included a link which provides an overview of the community grant program eligibility and the application process, which we don't have to play today. I'm assuming you've had access to this through the website, but it does help as we explain the community grant process with our partner agencies and service groups who are interested in applying. Next slide, please. So the checklist for committee members is to ensure that applicants are nonprofit community groups and organizations whose primary focus is within the county. As well, organizations are only eligible to submit one per year. So if you see that an organization has an application for community services and for festivals and events, then we as staff would reach out and say, which of the two are you actually submitting for, because you can only have one application. So far, we haven't run into that issue, but it is something to keep in mind. The grant cannot be considered the organization or service groups or organization's primary source of funding. And instead, the organization has to show exploration of other financial and in-kind support. All funding should be for future initiatives. So we aren't paying for something that happened last summer, for example, and that won't be considered under any circumstances. As well, the organization has to show evidence of responsiveness to community need, and equity and accessibility to participants has to be demonstrated. Funding is only for the fiscal year in which the organization has applied. So we sometimes have to double check that their fiscal year does align with the county's fiscal year, and there isn't that overlap for accounting purposes. So funding is not to be regarded as an ongoing commitment for future years. So it is just for the current year that's being contemplated. And we do make that clear with applicants and those who are successful in achieving a community grant. Repeat grants will only be considered for organizations who have complied with our reporting requirements of any previous grants. So they are required to send a summary report, kind of closing out their grant from the previous year in order to be eligible for the future year's grant submission. Funding requests may be reduced in value at the discretion of the committee and county council in order to support a wider range of initiatives. So again, this comes back to or directly links to the fact that it's oversubscribed and more people have bigger asks than what money is available. And so if they're asking for $10,000, it may not be possible that council and or the committee give them their full ask. And so we're pretty upfront with applicants in that regard as well. So the final report has to be submitted by the applicant, and they recognize that that final report will be made publicly available on the website and submitted to Elgin County Council for accountability purposes. The county is not obligated to allocate funds to any organization. So should the committee decide to recommend to council that some, but not all of the applicants receive funding, then that's certainly within the discretion of the committee. Grant applications determined to be ineligible for funding or denied funding will be notified on behalf of the committee in writing. Next slide, please. So any unused grant funds at the end of the year will be carried over into the next year, and that's subject to council's approval for the same. And applicants can only apply for up to 50% of their project, service, or event expense up to a maximum of $10,000. And under no circumstances can that grant exceed 50% of the eligible costs for that program or event. Next slide, please. So any questions about that section before I keep going? Just want to make sure I give you the opportunity to jump in. Thanks, Donna. Okay, looks like we're okay in the council chambers here. So in terms of eligibility, this is pretty important. And certainly my team and I do a preliminary review of eligible organizations. And then we'll discuss that with committee members as we go through the applications. So to be eligible for the community grant program, you have to be an incorporated not-for-profit organization. Organizations with a charitable number, community associations, and unincorporated groups with not-for-profit goals and a governance structure. And funded activities and services must take place within the county of Elgin under most circumstances. And again, we keep reinforcing that even though an applicant may meet all of the eligibility criteria, it doesn't necessarily guarantee funding. Next slide, please. So ineligible organizations and ineligible activities, we wanted to be very transparent with our community with respect to who can and cannot apply for this funding. So we did develop this list, and anyone who is for profit, whether they be an organization or a venture, are ineligible for this. Any sort of religious activities or religious organizations. And we did put a bit of a provision there to say that funding requests from religious organizations and funding bodies must demonstrate clear boundaries between its religious and fundraising content and public programming in both program details and budget. Political parties are excluded. Hospitals, foundations, sports teams, programs or events that promote the county of Elgin. That may be a typo as I read it out loud. Pardon me, just put a strike through that one. And organizations whose activities are deemed to come under the jurisdiction of other levels, divisions, department, or agencies of the county. So school boards, post-secondary institutions, county-funded social services, hospitals, business improvement associations, and fundraising activities are also not eligible for community grant programs, and then any activities taking place outside of the county of Elgin. So next slide, please. So capital projects are also excluded. And in recent years, we have denied a request for a pavilion, and you'll see that there is a request for some capital expenses coming through this year's grant requests as well. Community grant funding cannot be used for deficit reduction, retroactive activities, HST, and again, programming outside of Elgin County. Next slide, please. So we have talked about, but I keep reinforcing these because it is a lot to consider as you go through these applications, but funding requests must be within the maximum, which is $10,000, and should not exceed 50% of the total program budget. Applicants with any outstanding final reports are ineligible to submit for subsequent funding requests. And I will note, for the sake of the committee, that my team does follow up with those applicants and ask for their final reports and or a status update or a timeline as to when we could be expecting that report. We also have to be pretty strict with deadlines, so late applications will not be accepted. Funding applications cannot be signed by County of Elgin employees or Elgin County councillors. So as an individual on the committee or as an Elgin County councillor, you can't submit a request through this program. Applicants are strongly encouraged to reach out to our staff, and we do have a very good website, different ways that community members and community agencies can connect with our staff. And we do find that, especially in the fall, we are quite busy with requests from agencies and groups with respect to this program and the funding details. Next slide, please. So applications should support innovative initiatives and services that provide both direct and indirect benefits to Elgin County residents. And if you get an opportunity to look at the application, which is on our website, you'll see that we ask questions to this effect. Community grant program doesn't focus on providing funding for operating expenses of an organization. So we don't directly fund the staff of other organizations. We do have pretty strict requirements when it comes to what kind of information, including budget information, financial information for the organizations that we are seeking. And we do follow up with organizations whose applications are incomplete or endeavor to do so before we present it to the committee. And the committee may, in its sole discretion, schedule a meeting with an organization or several organizations to discuss matters related to the submitted application. And in previous years, the committee has held meetings where grant applicants have attended and presented their proposals in person. Pre-pandemic, the submission of an application does not guarantee they will be awarded a grant. So if we look at the 2023 applicants, and again, you don't have the full applications in front of you because I did want to run through all of the eligibility with you. We will be following up with a toolkit, so to speak, so a scoring matrix, along with some instructions for you. The complete proposals for each of the community service organizations and the festival and event applications. And then we are available to help walk you through the scoring if it is something you haven't done previously. But you'll see we did receive a request from St. Mary's St. Helens Youth Group for a vacation Bible school. And this is what we call a seed grant. So the first time they're holding this, and it's a new concept or idea. And they are asking for $1,500. And through my review, I've deemed that this is ineligible because it is a religious group and not available to the broader community. Tillsonburg and District Multi-Service Center, they were awarded just over $2,000 in 2022. Their 2023 ask is for $2,100. And their program is home support, employment, and literacy services. STEAM Education Center, it's building digital equity and financial resilience post-COVID. That is the name of their program. last year for a different program, they did receive $6,000. Nope, $6,200. Nope. Apologize, I don't have my glasses and that's quite a ways away. 66, 63. And this year they are asking for $10,000. And I can say that their ask over the past several years has consistently been $10,000. 𝗥𝘂𝗿 is seeking a 𝗥𝘂𝗿 grant in the amount of $2,000. Last year, they were awarded $1,218. And we did receive their final report. Quad County Support Services is seeking $3,200. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jenna, $3,200. And in 2022, they did receive $1,200. Next slide, please. And this gets even smaller. 𝗣𝗹 Beach Fest. This is also small. Must be getting old. 𝗣𝗹 Beach Fest is seeking a 𝗥𝘂𝗿 grant in the amount of $10,000. They did receive just over $6,500 in 2022. We did receive their final report. Elmer and East Elgin Agricultural Society. It's an exciting year for them for their 175th Elmer Fair. 𝗥𝘂𝗿 grant in the amount of $10,000. They did receive $5,739 last year. Wallacestown Ag Society for the Wallacestown Fair. They're seeking $10,000. Last year, they were awarded $6,224. Elgin County Pride, this is their first ask through the community grant program, and they are seeking $6,750. Port Burwell Periscope Playhouse. They are seeking support for an outdoor concert venue. And I missed this when I put it in your agenda, but I do think it is ineligible because it is a capital expense. And so it's similar to the pavilions that we've reviewed and denied in the past. Is that fair to say?
Without looking at the application, I would have to.
Calypso Festival is a 𝗥𝘂𝗿 ask in the amount of $10,000. Last year, they did receive just about $6,800. VON is a well-attended event, seniors in picnic in the park, generally co-sponsored by the county, and they are asking $2,500. Last year, they received $1,475. Elgin County Plowmen's Association for the plowing match, they're seeking $250. Last year, they did get $150. The Shedden Agricultural Society is seeking $4,500. Last year, they received $2,546 for the Shedden Fair. Rodney Aldeboro Agricultural Society is seeking $10,000, and they did get just over $6,200 last year. So when it comes to allocating funds, in 2020 and 2021, the 𝗟𝗔 committee spent a great deal of time, energy, and effort in reviewing the process for this program, and they developed new evaluation materials. The committee carefully defined its objectives, outlined the review process, and defined the timelines for this program. They set clear expectations for staff with respect to how we will communicate their expectations to prospective organizations and groups. And they really set the stage for a smooth process that we're using, in theory, for the second time through this grant review process. The committee shared the goal of awarding the most deserving grantees by defining the objectives of the community grant program to provide clarity around how funds would be allocated. And the committee also defined a multi-stage review process that endeavored to reflect the needs of the community grant program and included screening applicants for eligibility requirements, a review of the evaluation using an evaluation rubric, and recommending grant allocations to council. So a key step in the community grant program is effectively allocating funds. And your jobs are to review grant proposals and make decisions on awards for recommendation to council. So Council really depends on this committee to undertake that thorough and objective evaluation of all grant applications and collaboratively make transparent and fair recommendations regarding funding in order to maximize impact across the county. So committee members must differentiate somehow the very best applications from comparatively weaker ones. And we recognize, because the program is oversubscribed, obtaining funding through this program is increasingly competitive. And so more and more groups are relying on this committee to have a fair and transparent process by which you assign these funds. So the strengths and weaknesses of each proposal has been translated into a numeric rating tool or scoring tool that we provide each counselor with, and that is available through each of the grant applications so that the applicant can see how the committee is scoring their responses. And the first step to conducting your review is to collect objective reviews from each member of the committee. And those confidential reviews that are submitted right to the deputy clerk really helps to avoid initial bias and groupthink. And what we do is we gather those individual scores, we develop averages and report back to the committee what the average scores were. And then the committee has the opportunity to collaborate and to adjust those scores based on what our funding recommendations are. So we really rely on a numerical strategy because it can not only help us break through an impasse in committee discussions, but can help the best applications filter to the top. So we do have 1 full year of experience with this and did find it was successful in helping identify the great proposals from the weaker ones. And then we did provide feedback to the weaker proposals so that in future years they could have more success moving forward. So we feel that we have optimized the community grant program for fairness. And we just encourage each evaluator to use an equity filter. So ensure you've provided equitable access to all applicants at each juncture with clear intentions and a well-developed review structure. So we hope we will prepare you with this and then encourage you to be as equitable as possible. Making your reviews strictly professional and not personal. So for many of us, we have close ties or experiences with some of these festivals, events, and service organizations. And instead, your job is to point out the strengths and the weaknesses of those applications based on the information that is before you and not your experiences with that group. So you have to be aware of what may exist, which is unconscious bias. If you are familiar with these individuals who are associated with the groups or, again, have your own experience. And identify and be proactive regarding bias, recognizing that your individual reviews will really vary. And sometimes when you see the average score, it may surprise you. And we've seen that in the past, but recognize that if you're avoiding your own bias, then and you're scoring fairly, then that's just the nature of the process. So in terms of formula, I'm trying to keep it simple here, but it can look quite complicated on a spreadsheet, but we use a weighting factor, which is a total score multiplied by each ask, divided by the sum of all scores, and multiplied by the sum of all asks. And so when you see it in a spreadsheet at your next meeting, I can help walk you through what that actually looks like. But we have a year's experience with this and found that it does actually work. And I have the same chairman this year, but the chairman and I last year, or even 2 years ago, we were back and forth several times, double checking and confirming. And
Same chair.
yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. So I get.
You were right on 50%. I was right on that.
Yes, so it's a team effort between the chair and I to validate these numbers before we present them to you. In terms of recommended allocation, it's a weighting factor divided by total weights times available money. And we'll look at that recommended allocation today. And then the normalization factor we use is the sum of the weighting factor. So in terms of overview of the process, so we do undertake a pre-screening of the applications. And so we've identified two that we will still include in your review package. So one will be St. Mary's St. Helens for the Vacation Bible School, and the other will be the Periscope Playhouse for their outdoor concert venue. So you can review and we can have a discussion at our next meeting to ensure that our assessment is in fact correct, which is that they are ineligible based on the community grant program criteria. We will provide you with a toolkit for you to conduct your individual scoring to ensure impartiality. And then you'll send that to us. My team and I compile those scores to come up with an average total score. Then we use those three calculations that I just went through very quickly, and we seek consensus from the group. So we do have an open discussion about each application, about the scores, about the averages, about the formula that are presented before you, and then we seek consensus at the next meeting. Next slide, please. So in terms of the budget overview, we do have a policy that supports a grant allocation per household. So that amount for 2023 is $3.68 per household. And there's about 19,800 households in Elgin. And that equates to $72,900 to spend through this program. And the total number of community grant program requests, so this 92,880 did include the Periscope Playhouse, but it did not include the Vacation Bible Camp. And so if we took out the Periscope Playhouse, that leaves us with a total ask of 82,880. And we'll send the revised figures to committee members. So the sole proposal for the SEED Community Services Grant, which was the St. Mary's St. Helens Vacation Bible Camp or program, the proposed budget is $0 for SEED grants. Community Services Cultivate, the proposed budget is $14,819. So that represents 20% of the total ask for the program. Festivals and events. So if we adjusted this number based on and took out the $10,000 ask for capital expenses associated with an outdoor venue, then we're considering an amount of $56,293. Wrong 16. Yes.
Would you do the proportion on the ask rather than the budget? So for example, the community services, probably put the mic on. The community services Cultivate would be the 18,880, right? That excludes the seed side. And then the festival and events, if we were to discount the Periscope $10,000 ask, would you use that 64,000 and then use those two to come up with your proportion of the ask? So you're not just trying to figure out right now, is it 20% of the services, 70% or 80%?
I think it's actually 23%
Okay.
for community services and 77% for festivals and events.
Okay.
And those totals would be for community services, $16,607, and for festivals and events, a total of $56,293 for a grand total of $82,880. So those are the values that I propose that we use. And so for the allocations, so we know we'd give 16,607 to community services and then 56,293 to those applying for festivals and grants and events grant money. I would take your individual scores. We would average those and then use them as part of the formula to come up with our recommendations for your next budget. So coming up with some consensus associated with the proposed budget is very helpful at this stage. Otherwise, we can't quickly come up with the values at your next meeting. So it helps us be better prepared moving forward.
Okay, let's open that up for some discussion then from the committee members. Are you comfortable with the allocations that Julie has proposed? In other words, the 23%, 77% for the festivals, 23% for the services, based on the applicant dollars that come in. Does that sound fair? Does that sound all right to you, Donna?
Yes, it does.
Mark? Okay, I think you've got consensus. You don't need a motion or anything at this point.
Great. So the next slide just covered off allocations again, and then we've identified next steps, but I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have at this point in time.
Perfect. Thank you, Julie. And Grant, please.
Thank you, Warden. With regards to when each member is coming up with their score, how do we come up with is there a 1 out of 10, or is it how's the scoring done? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to committee members, that is an excellent question, and it's part of what we will send out to you, and what's available on our website is program criteria. And so you will be scoring different categories using a total value. So for example, it's clearly laid out for organizational overview and what you should be looking for, and that's a score out of 5. Design is a score out of 30 and includes application questions 3 through 5. And the applicant is responsible for including a detailed, clear description of their festival and event, and including key dates and a schedule of activities. And then it jumps into needs and impact. And this was very important to the previous community, or the 𝗏𝗏 committee. And so this is scored out of 40 and relates back to questions 6 through 8 of the application. And you're scoring them based on how evident the program or service will enhance the community and has the potential to achieve a positive impact. And they also have to show evidence that their program or service will increase participation and engage persons with disabilities. And their event plan should include consideration for participation, engagement, and accessibility for persons with disabilities. And then the final criteria is efficiency, transparency, and accountability, and that's a score out of 25. And again, that links back to the application that the respondents have to fill out, questions 9 through 12. And within this section, they have to detail the importance of the funding to the continued capacity of their organization, contribution to the community, and the organization's ability to achieve funding priorities and outcomes, provides all the required financials and budget information that we've requested, details other sources of funding, which is a program requirement, and details outcomes and reporting strategy. For example, how they will measure their success. So that's to give you an overview. That is for festivals and events. Similar criteria and scoring matrix has been designed for the community services. So we will provide you with these toolkits, which will help you, as well as a scoring matrix, which is pretty self-explanatory as well. My team and I are available to help any committee members walk through a couple of these so that you're feeling okay about what your role is.
You're gonna have a lot of fun. Any additional questions? Donna, are you okay? You've been through this one a couple of
good.
times. Mark? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Julie.
Be it resolved that the report from the Chief Administrative Officer be received for information.
Mover and seconder for that, please. Okay, Mark Widner will move, Grant Jones will second. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on with 7.2, General Manager of Engineering, Planning, Enterprise, Deputy CAO, and Acting Manager of Planning, the Elgin County Official Plan Review, Draft Official Plan. Brian, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to the committee. I will start off with a brief PowerPoint presentation detailing and presenting before you the draft official plan before turning it over to our external planning consultant, Mr. Paul Hicks, who will present the staff report and be able to answer any specific technical questions with which committee members may have. So first starting off with what an official plan is and why it's required. An official plan is a legal statutory planning document required by the province that includes goals, visions, and a direction of a municipality with respect to how it plans to develop into the future. The county's current official plan was adopted back in 2013 in accordance with the Planning Act and is required to be updated every 5 years. The plan is essentially a roadmap that addresses matters of provincial interest and ensures consistency with the provincial policy statement. The purpose of the plan review is to ensure that it continues to reflect the needs, visions, and aspirations of the community while ensuring the requirements of applicable regulations. Proposed plan policies address important parts of the community that affect everyone who lives and works in Elgin County throughout each of its sectors. Its impact on our community includes several different areas. Number one, it makes the public aware of the county's general land use planning principles and policies. It ensures growth is coordinated and meets our community's needs, helps the community understand land use needs into the future, prescribes where development will occur, provides a framework to our local municipal partners in the preparation of their local official plans, official plan amendments, and zoning bylaws. It provides a way to prioritize conflicting land use principles where meeting local, regional, and provincial interests. Finally, it also demonstrates council's commitment to future growth of Elgin County. So with respect to a chronology, with respect to the plan review efforts completed to date, the official plan review exercise was launched back on February 25th, 2021 by council. A public consultation portal utilizing Elgin County's Engage Elgin website was published thereafter. Following the departure of our former manager of planning, Mr. Hicks, care of 𝗔𝗶𝗁𝗃, our external planning consultant, was retained by council just over a year ago in January to finalize the plan. Since that time and over the duration of this assignment, 5 specific discussion papers have been prepared, presented before 𝗔𝗶𝗃, before being tabled before council, that dealt with various key matters such as servicing and development, provincial policy statement, and applicable recent changes associated with that. Elgin County's natural heritage system study, source water protection, and environmental policy amendments, housing and affordability, and then most recently, tabling of the population, housing, and employment forecasts and associated land needs analysis report that was prepared by Hempson Consulting, also retained by Elgin County. Other resources made available on our project website include a copy of the report, as just mentioned, prepared by Hempson, the Elgin Natural Heritage System Study. In addition, 3 what we heard reports were prepared that responded to public feedback with which we've received to date, whether it be from members of the public external agencies, or other interested parties. In addition, the OP is guided by other supporting documents, which includes our ongoing efforts with respect to the county's transportation master plan, as well as the St. Thomas Elgin affordability and social housing strategy. Community and stakeholder engagement is a critical component of the county's official plan exercise. And specific to that, a public engagement strategy was developed to make sure that stakeholders and citizens had an opportunity to provide input throughout the process into the development of the official plan. The strategy focused on ensuring public engagement was transparent, focused, and accessible, and the supporting guiding documents in the strategy are available on our Engage Elgin website. In addition, 3 community feedback meetings were held throughout the county as it related to presentation of Elgin County's Natural Heritage System Study, source water protection, and environmental policy amendment efforts in that regard. As we continue to move throughout the process and move closer towards ultimately adoption of the county's official plan, by no means has consultation with the public come to an end. In fact, we still want to hear from you, and interested members of the public and external agencies still have the opportunity to provide comment throughout the process. With respect to next steps, in a moment, Mr. Hicks will table and present to the committee our draft official plan, in which the committee will be asked to consider endorsement of the official plan necessary to begin technical circulation. If endorsed today, technical circulation is anticipated to take place over the next 3 weeks and give the opportunity to our local municipal partners and other agencies to provide input on that draft plan compiled to date. Staff thereafter will compile that feedback, prepare responses, and amend the OP if required before tabling the final draft OP back before the committee. Thereafter, once the final draft OP is endorsed, County Council will have the opportunity to undertake its review of the final report. Thereafter, public consultation of the final OP document will be undertaken for a period of approximately 4 weeks, after which, once again, when feedback is received, responses will be prepared, and if required, the OP amended. Before the final step of presenting the final draft OP before County Council, at which point endorsement by council will be required before the plan is submitted to the ministry for final approval. At this point in time, staff is targeting a completion date in the month of June at this point in time. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to now turn it over to Mr. Hicks, who will present the staff report and address any questions that the committee may have.
And thank you for that, Brian. Oh, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee members. I'm happy to take the reins and present this very it's a very exciting document, a very long process that we've been undertaking, and very excited to show you the fruits of the labor so far. I will perhaps take my direction from you, Mr. Chair, as to how you'd like me to present the official plan to committee for consideration today. I'm certainly happy to provide an overview of how we've kind of essentially got here today, without reiterating the same comments that came from Mr. Lima. If you would, I can take you through kind of a detailed walkthrough. I've tried to, in the staff report, you will notice that it's quite bulleted, the way that we tried to summarize the changes and the policies, just for ease of use by committee members and the readability for the public. But I can certainly walk you through our process to date, and if you'd like me to, I want to make sure that there's enough room for discussion and question and answer, and I can certainly pass it back to you, Mr. Chair, after that, or if you'd like me to walk through a more detailed explanation of the policies and changes, it's at your discretion how you'd like me to proceed.
Well, thank you for that, Paul. I'm going to look for a quick look around the room, see what the committee was interested in. It is a lengthy document to read, not only the report, but the draft itself. I would think if we highlighted on the changes, that might suffice for committee appetite at this time. Donna, does that sound good to you?
Myself here. That sounds good because I haven't had the time to read it totally yet. So highlighted the significant changes would be great.
Okay, is that okay, Paul?
That works on my end, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much. So what I'll do then is I can again talk a little bit about the process, about how we got here without repeating the comments that and the summary that Mr. 𝗔𝗂𝗍 provided, and then I'll walk you through the report that's before committee today that does have the bullet points. But what I'll do is I'll try to stay at that kind of fine level of not maybe at 30,000 feet, but not at ground level, and highlight some of the major changes, and also highlight some of the things that haven't changed as well too, and are proposed to be changed, because there are some important parts of that that committee should be aware of. I'd start by saying that overall, with the existing official plan that was adopted back in 2011, approved by the ministry in 2013, Elgin County's had a very good official plan to work within. It is and was quite a lengthy document, and in some parts could be quite cumbersome to read. So some of the focus on our team in revisiting the official plan was certainly around wanting to make sure that the document was more accessible, having a view to ensuring that we are really scoping the policies to county-wide policies, and not creating kind of a redundant policy frameworks that we already see at the local level, and just ensuring that it's a useful document for the county and will appropriately guide development into the next 20 years. Mr. 𝗔𝗂𝗍 certainly highlighted the extensive work program that's taken place since 2021. The conclusion of that background work program wrapped up at the end of summer of this past year, in 2022, with the completion of discussion paper number 5, as was highlighted by Mr. 𝗔𝗂𝗍. That is always a very important discussion paper, or an important part of any official plan review process, is reassessing population projections and land needs analysis. So it was a good way to kind of cap off that background exercise and culminate that background exercise that was undertaken. Subsequently, after that was completed, we undertook the development and the review of the official plan. I think what's really important to note for committee at this point is originally the instructions that we were provided by the County of Elgin, and were the instructions from committee and from council, was to undertake a review of the existing document and essentially to prepare an amendment to the existing document. This is a very normal approach when municipalities, whether you're at an upper or lower tier, when they're conducting a review. It doesn't necessarily mean throwing out the entire document and starting fresh again, but simply to amending that document. But something happened on the way to the bank, and that was when we started to piece together the amendment, we started to realize just the size and scope and shape of the amendment that was starting to take place. Was what we were essentially doing was preparing a new official plan. Part of that is, and that doesn't have anything to do with the way that the county or staff in the past have administered the plan. It's actually more of a factor of when the plan was originally adopted and approved back in around, and again, that adoption occurring in 2011 and that approval by the ministry back in 2013. Is a lot has changed in the planning system in Ontario since that time. So we've been through 2 different cycles of new provincial policy statements coming out. We've had source water protection plans come out. We've had housing and homelessness strategies that have been adopted. We've had substantial changes to the Planning Act that have occurred during that period. The most recent, which I'm sure everybody is aware of, being Bill 23. So when we had gone through this extensive review of all the policies and guidelines and regulations and legislation that's changed at that time, and we also went through the extensive background work that the County of Elgin had undertaken itself, it became quite clear that we needed to bring forward the idea that perhaps we shouldn't be just looking at an amendment to the official plan, but we should be looking at a new official plan entirely. And then again, that doesn't mean that everything that was in that existing official plan is going to go out the window. It simply means we need to look at a fresh document and just a fresh approach to the official plan. And I've outlined in the staff report the reasons for that, and particularly that first bullet that you see on page 37 of the agenda package highlights just the amount that's actually changed during the time since the original plan was adopted. There is also some administrative benefits to examining a new official plan as well too. And it's one of the reasons that many of the local municipalities in Elgin have also in recent, just in the past couple of years, have adopted new official plans as opposed to undertaking just updates and reviews to them. The primary benefit to adopting a new official plan for the county as opposed to just amending the existing one is twofold. The first one is due to recent changes under the Planning Act, if the county was just to examine amending the existing official plan, the province of Ontario is approval authority for it, and then that amendment is subject to an appeal from whether it be the county of Elgin or any body in the county of Elgin could appeal that. And then we are still subject to a 5-year review cycle. So once that any appeals would be dealt with, the amendment would be consolidated, then in 5 years' time, we are now back reviewing the official plan again as required by legislation. If the county of Elgin proceeds to adopt a brand new official plan, this slate is kind of wiped clean. And the advantages are the province is still approval authority. The county could still appeal a decision from the province on our official plan, but the official plan wouldn't then be subject to what they call third-party appeals. It's not, in other words, that nobody could just walk off the street and say, you know what, I've reviewed the plan and we'd like to appeal the plan. So it limits the amount of potential litigation with the approval of the plan. So that's the first advantage to it. The second advantage to it is it also means that under the Planning Act, changes to the Planning Act, the county doesn't actually have to revisit and update the official plan for another 10 years with a new official plan coming into effect. So essentially you get to skip that first review period. So we don't have to undertake and run the risk of being in litigation with a new official plan. We get to push back that initial review to a 10-year period and don't have to review it then until that time. There is actually also a third advantage as well too. Those are the two primary ones. The third advantage being is sometimes when we're looking at a really, really major amendment to a planning document, such as an official plan, we're essentially going in and cutting and pasting and removing certain sections and removing sections around and deleting terminology and replacing it with new terminology, et cetera. What sometimes happens is it's almost an editorial comment, but the plans end up sometimes kind of losing their storyline or their thrust, and they almost become even more difficult and cumbersome documents to read because now they're a patchwork of amendments that have taken place to them. So those are some of the reasons that we presented to Mr. Lee and to staff to say we feel strongly that the committee and council should be considering a new official plan as opposed to just an amendment. And that was a slight change to the original proposed work plan. I would say in terms of level of effort, in terms of costs that went into the development of the plan, as I say, when we prepared that initial amendment, we were essentially looking at a fairly brand new official plan at the time. So it didn't push any of our internal timelines back in terms of the preparation of what's before committee today. But it is an important point that we do want to highlight is that we would no longer be looking at an amendment to the existing document, which is going back to closer to 15 years ago now. That it is a brand new document that would be in front of committee for consideration. In terms of the changes, and the committee can certainly walk along with me through the staff report. I'm on page 38 of the report, the covering report with the official plan. In terms of general changes, as I've highlighted there, we brought the plan into conformity with the current Planning Act, with the current provincial policy statement, and all updated provincial and national guidelines. So a lot of this is housekeeping in nature, but just again, making sure that all parts of the plan are current. One of the key changes that did take place to the structure of the plan revolves around replacing this community vision that exists in the original document with 10 strategic directions. So the original document did contain a community vision statement, which was quite a long, almost 2-page long community vision. The community vision, if I could be quite frank, wasn't necessarily a community vision for an official plan or a vision or end state of what we would like to see Elgin County look like. It was actually more of a physical description of the county. So we didn't have the same kind of thrust as a vision statement normally has. because it was a bit difficult to understand why it was written that way, it would be a bit confusing for a reader. We wanted to replace it, what we felt, with 10 strategic directions that were more targeted to issues and matters that are of importance to county and importance to county council. So those 10 strategic directions replace the community vision. The 10 strategic directions are not new directions. These are all directions that you would find in the existing official plan. We've just, again, reorganized them so they read a bit differently. And quite frankly, we hope that they read a bit more clearly to the reader. But again, there's nothing new out of those strategic directions that you won't find in the existing plan. The third major kind of general change that we made to the document too was primarily editorial, but it was going through and trying to remove as much technical language as we could from the document and introducing plain language, going through a scoping exercise, as I mentioned before, to reduce redundant policy that we find in both local official plans and county official plans. But we also saw a lot of redundancy in the existing document itself, so repetitive policies. What we end up with is a document that is reduced in size from essentially 117 pages worth of policy to 63 pages worth of policy. I do think that makes the document overall much more easy to read for the end user to understand from the general public or from the development community, and certainly for decision makers such as yourself, a committee, and county council. It will make it much more easy to navigate the document. So those are some of the important overall changes. Walking through again, chapter 1, the introduction. Again, we've simply, the only real changes that we've introduced here is we've introduced some explanatory language around how the Ontario planning system works, the place that the county official plan sits in the hierarchy of the planning system, how provincial policy statement and how a local official plan interact. Again, this is to help make the document more readable for the end user, whether that be a member of the general public, decision makers such as yourself, or members of the development community. Within the growth management section, which is chapter 2, we've brought all of the urban boundaries up to date on the land use schedule, so they're reflective of the current boundaries. That was actually a recent survey that we did of the local municipalities, just to make sure that we had those mapped properly. We clarified how conceptual urban boundaries are to be evaluated. We increased the intensification and density target a whopping 1% from 15 to 16%, but that reflects the population and land needs analysis that was completed by Henson Consulting that Mr. 𝗟𝗠 mentioned. And we also removed the requirement for the completion of a settlement area capability study for certain types of developments that are to be located on private services or relying on groundwater or septic systems. This was a study that is, if I could say, kind of it's not a standard study that you would find in other jurisdictions across Ontario. This was a study that was unique to the County of Elgin's official plan. And if I could be quite frank, there was a lack of a terms of reference in that study. And when we were canvassing the previous manager of planning, when we were canvassing municipal staff, it appeared that this was causing quite a bit of confusion as to when this study would be required and what the terms of reference would look like for the study. In our understanding of the intention of the study and the purpose of the study, it was to ensure that there were, the ground conditions and water conditions, groundwater conditions were suitable for certain types of development. And we felt that the study was a bit redundant in that regard, and that if we revisited some of the policies as they relate to private servicing, to natural heritage, et cetera, the same goals are achieved without having this requirement for this additional study, the settlement area capability study. So we have removed that proposing to remove that from the growth management section. With respect to economic development, very briefly on this, the current chapter on economic development was primarily focused around economic development programming as opposed to land use. So we wanted to remove because it's not a part of the core mandate of the planning department at Elgin, we wanted to remove the programming aspect from the official plan to focus on the core mandate of the planning department, which is land use and regulation of land use. and allow the Economic Development Department at the County of Elgin a bit more flexibility to design their own programming and not kind of bound that programming up in a legislative document like an official plan. So we reorganized this section to focus on primarily on three aspects of the counties, again, in a county-wide economy. A focus on industrial development and ensuring that we're providing a substantial land base for that industrial development, and we're protecting transportation and infrastructure corridors that service that industrial development, protection of the agricultural system in the county, which is not just protecting the agricultural land base, but is protecting the producers, the processors, industry that is also involved in the agricultural industry in the county. And the third is a focus on tourism. And wanting to ensure that we're creating communities and corridors that are supportive of the tourism industry and the importance of the tourism industry in the county. So again, to highlight removing the programming aspect to focus on the core mandate, and the core mandate centered around encouraging industrial development, protecting our agricultural industry, and encouraging tourism in the county. Chapter 4 is a new chapter. These are primarily policies that you would have found scattered throughout the document in the existing official plan, but it was felt by our project team and in discussions with Mr. Lima and the county that it was important that we have an identified section that dealt solely with housing and housing affordability. In the new official plan, given our current situation across this country, the housing crisis that municipalities across the country are currently facing. So this is a large consolidation of policies that you would have otherwise found scattered throughout the document. In terms of some of the major changes to this, you'll see in the second bullet point there, we are proposing to introduce a new policy that would require at least a minimum of 30% new dwellings in any proposed new plan of subdivision or condominium to be other forms of housing than just single detached dwellings. So that could be semi-detached townhouses, row houses, duplex apartments, or low-rise apartments, any type of combination, but wanting to see a greater diversification in the supply of housing, which in itself has affordability implications. Semi-detached house, for instance, being slightly more affordable, ostensibly slightly more affordable than a single detached house. And we are maintaining the plan's existing target of 25% of new homes being affordable. And this is something that, this is kind of a default target that the province often uses in official plans, that will target 25% affordability for low and moderate income households. To give committee a bit of a sense of what this looks like on the ground, when we calculated using the new census, the percentage of Elgin County's population that falls within the low to median income range, that's actually 55% of the county. It falls within a low to medium income household. So we are targeting at least 25% of new housing to serve that population, which quite frankly accounts for a little over half of the Elgin County population. It may be something that committee wants to revisit and up that target amount, or that council may wish to do that. Certainly, I can certainly report back to committee if they'd like to see that target increased, or they may be satisfied with the 25%, the existing 25% target. We've also introduced some additional policies around the conversion of rental housing, wanting to ensure that the county is exploring when they'll be disposing of surplus lands or facilities, opportunities for those lands and facilities to be used for affordable housing. That's not committing council or committee to doing that. It's simply pointing out that it should be explored before that disposal happens. Encouraging the creation of emergency shelters, transitional housing, community housing, or social housing, and then encouraging coordination with higher levels of government. Overall, I'd suggest that the majority of the policies that you're going to see in this new section, one, are clarifications of existing policies, but are also primarily enabling policies. So again, encouraging new forms of housing to be constructed, encouraging us to coordinate our efforts with higher levels of government to see increased housing opportunities introduced into the county. Chapter 5 deals with the rural area, which is again synonymous with the agricultural area of the county. You will see that most of the policies, if you are doing a side-by-side comparison between the two documents, you'll see most of the policies are extensively rewritten in this section. Notwithstanding that We are still complying with the bare minimum requirements in terms of protection of agricultural lands and facilities as noted in provincial policy. But the other thing to kind of note with that is since the original plan was adopted, there's actually, and I would suggest this is very good news for agricultural operators, for the county and for local municipalities, there's been a loosening up of some of the more strict policies that we saw in the agricultural area, not with regards to land division, but with regards to different types of uses being permitted in the agricultural area. So agriculturally related uses, on-farm diversified uses. That could be everything from I'm a contractor and I live in the rural area and I'd like to use part of my farm property to operate my trade, my side business out of. Anyway, the point of it being is so many of these policies were revisited over the past 10 years that this section required kind of an extensive revisiting of that. And again, I'd suggest that the vast majority of those policies that we've revised are more flexible and are more loose than what was previously mandated under provincial policy. And again, a good news story, I'd suggest. We have introduced a policy about protecting rural character, particularly from non-farm development, and also mitigating against the impacts of climate change. In terms of what has stayed the same, a 40-hectare minimum farm parcel size, which is something that has been regularly mandated by the province, is something that exists in the existing official plan. We're not proposing to change it in the new official plan. And there's no changes to the policies with respect to surplus farm dwelling severances, which I know are often quite important to local municipalities. So this is when, if committee members briefly explain, that's when you have, I'm a farmer, I have my home farm that I live on, I have purchased another farm down the road from me that has a house on it. That second house is surplus to my needs because I live on my home farm. You're still allowed to sever off that dwelling. Those policies have not changed. They've not changed at the provincial level, and we wouldn't be proposing to change them at the county level. Another major change with the rural area, you'll note in kind of the midsection of the document, or of that section on the rural area, there was a special policy area that was applied to certain lands east of the city of St. Thomas that included the St. Thomas Municipal Airport. And they were called a special policy area. They were essentially industrial lands that were set aside for industrial development. I can't particularly explain why it was ever chosen that these lands be designated as a special policy area. From my perspective as an urban planner, I would see these lands as being extraordinarily important for economic development purposes for the county. These are large tracts of industrial land that surround an airport, a major transportation facility such as an airport. So we are proposing to see these lands removed out of the special policy designation, be brought into the settlement area of Elgin, of Central Elgin, and essentially just be designated for industrial purposes, which always was the intent of the special policy area. So again, we're not changing what's are currently permitted, but certainly just formalizing it, formally recognizing it in the official plan. But it is something that would be a substantial change to the rural area. In terms of Chapter 6 settlement areas, you'll find, I think, most of these policies are really just clarifications of existing policies that we see in the plan. Quite often, the county's position historically has been to leave development in the urban areas to the local municipalities to decide what's best for that local municipality. That's certainly the intent of the way that these policies have been redrafted. We have introduced a new policy that relates to protecting of the the urban character of the county's unique villages and towns. I'm wanting to avoid development patterns that don't support and reflect the existing small town, quite frankly, small town charm of Elgin County. And we've also established a new minimum net density of 20 dwelling units per hectare to make sure that we're not encouraging urban sprawl. To give you a sense of what a minimum of 20 dwelling units per net hectare looks like, if we were looking at a very standard lot size of 15 by 30 meters or 50 feet by 100 feet, which is a very generous size standard lot in a service settlement area, you would be well within your 20, you would be able to meet your minimum 20 units per net hectare quite easily. But again, it's just establishing what we're attempting to do, establish a density floor for development in the urban areas to ensure that, again, we're using our urban land efficiently and our infrastructure efficiently. With respect to the natural system, as Mr. Lima had pointed out, since the time of the adoption of the original official plan, the Elgin County Natural Heritage Study has been completed. This is a large reorganization. The mapping of the official plan reflects the most recent study that was completed. I think, again, you'll find if you are looking at a side-by-side comparison of the existing policies versus those that are proposed in the new official plan, not a lot has actually changed at the end of the day. We still are reflecting the minimum requirements that are required in a provincial policy for the protection of natural heritage areas and the protection of natural features. Nothing really new or above those minimum requirements has been introduced in this official plan. One of the exceptions to that rule would be to note that we have introduced a policy regarding compensatory planning. So if there is a part of the natural heritage system, so to give you an example, if we were dealing with a subdivision that was going to seek to destroy a woodlot for the development, to cut down a woodlot in the course of development, there would be a requirement that compensatory planting take place, not necessarily on the same lands, but if a hectare woodlot was removed, that the developer would have to commit to planting a hectare of woodland somewhere else in the county, somewhere else within that same watershed. So a kind of a one in, one out situation. With respect to transportation and infrastructure systems, the major change that you'll see in this section, which is section 8, is we have introduced we had the draft Elgin County Transportation Master Plan road classifications and standards that was available to us, although the master plan itself is not completed. So we've incorporated the new road classifications and standards into the official plan, just in anticipation of the eventual adoption of the transportation master plan. Otherwise, I think you'll find, again, in a side-by-side comparison, most of the policies that you're going to see are very reflective of the existing policies and are primarily related to kind of any changes are related to reorganization or clarification of existing policies as they relate to transportation and infrastructure systems. Then the last point that you'll note there includes, we've also outlined the noise exposure forecast and noise exposure projection contours, which are contours that impact development around airports. So you kind of takeoff and landing areas and the noise that comes out from those landing areas or those landing strips. These are existing federal contours or federal regulation that exists. They simply weren't mapped in the existing plan. Quite frankly, just because they weren't mapped in the existing plan doesn't mean that they didn't exist and we weren't required to enforce them. We're just now reflecting them in the schedule, so it's clear to people so they understand where those contours sit. With respect to Chapter 9, Natural Resource Management, this deals with everything from aggregate pits to extraction of salt or petroleum. Again, I think you'll find for the most part, this is just a reorganization of existing policies. If we were located in another area of the province, I'm going to use Eastern Ontario, for example, where we end up with kind of like large bedrock quarrying operations. These policies are often quite a bit more intensive and more controversial. When we're down in areas in southwestern Ontario, like Elgin, Lambton, Middlesex, et cetera, where aggregate operations are much less intrusive, there tends to be a much lower focus on these policies. And again, we didn't take to redo these policies to any great degree. And I think you'll find quite a side-by-side comparison, quite a bit of similarity between the two policies. With respect to development hazards, so this includes floodplain, this includes the CA regulated lands. We have kept again to the bare minimum requirements to meet our obligations under provincial policy. This is really reflecting that conservation authorities are responsible at the end of the day for regulating lands within provincial wetlands, within steep slopes, and within lands that are prone to flooding hazards. It's certainly my position as an urban planner that I would not want to see us introducing a number of redundant policies into this official plan when it is the responsibility and the scope of conservation authorities to administer this. So we've kept the policies, again, very very much in their same form. We have reorganized them to try to make them clear and to make sure that there are clear lines of distinction between the jurisdictions, and that the County of Elgin is not attempting to regulate something that is really more appropriately regulated by a conservation authority because it is their jurisdiction. One major change to this is we have removed policies that dealt with shoreline management plans. There were policies in the existing county official plan that dealt with the shoreline management plans that were developed by the conservation authorities along Lake Erie's shoreline. From my perspective as an urban planner, I would definitely see these as being much more, having much more impact on a local official plan. For lack of a better way, the county doesn't have a lot of skin in the game in administering shoreline management plans. They are administered by the conservation authorities at the local level. So reference to those shoreline management plans was removed, again, to avoid duplication and redundancies in the policies. With respect to cultural heritage, chapter 11, this is the way that we've shaped this section is to recognize that when we talk about cultural heritage, which would be, the designation of buildings that have a heritage interest of them, the county does not, under the Ontario Heritage Act, cannot and does not have a program of developing, of designating lands and buildings as historical or heritage. That is a matter that's left to local municipalities. So we wanted to remove some of the more redundant policies that we essentially don't administer from the beginning anyway. We wanted to focus the county's, refocus the county's policies on protection of archaeological resources, primarily due to the cross-jurisdictional nature of archaeological resources. They can be found in any jurisdiction, and so there are cross-jurisdictional elements to them. There's also a major Indigenous component to archaeological resources as well too. And so it made more sense for us to focus our attention on archaeological resources as opposed to the designation of buildings and structures as heritage. So again, with this, we are meeting our minimum requirements under provincial policy and under provincial legislation for the protection of agricultural, pardon me, I keep saying agricultural and I want to say archaeological, protection of archaeological resources. We have introduced some new policies with respect to protocols between when addressing when archaeological resources are found, how we can connect those archaeological resources with the First Nations whose ancestors left these resources behind. So we've developed some protocols with respect to how, or policies that require protocols as to how Indigenous archaeological artifacts will be dealt with, and how we deal with unexpected finds when development is well underway. Otherwise, I think you'll find, again, a side-by-side comparison. You won't find any real new or drastic policies that have been introduced. Chapters 12 and 13 are really about how we implement the plan, how we administer and implement and interpret the plan. Chapter 12 is how we review development applications. Again, I don't think you'll find anything ridiculously new within this section. It is really just clarifications of process and making sure that we've outlined transparent steps for when an individual has to come in, whether it's for a consent application, plan of subdivision, condominium, local official plan amendment, part lot control exemption, condo conversion, that we've outlined some very clear steps that applicants can follow. And that's really to make sure that we're being transparent and clear about what's expected of applicants and also county and local staff when processing applications. Probably not anything really groundbreaking, I would suggest, in this section, but really just want to make sure that we're providing clear, concise, and transparent steps that will be easy for everybody to follow. And again, just increasing the transparency and openness of the development review process. And with respect to implementation and administration, aside from the introduction of policies related to establishing a planning advisory committee, which was one of the changes to the Planning Act that came post approval of the original plan. So we've developed a small terms of reference for the establishment of a planning advisory committee. It's really just clarification of existing policies as they relate to how the plan is to be interpreted, administered, and reviewed. We also have included within this section as well too a small subsection dealing with annual reporting to County Council on the implementation of the plan. So keeping track of things like what population is looking like, the amount of residential land that has been consumed during a specific period, tracking our progress towards meeting affordable housing targets or intensification targets. We've outlined some steps for regular reporting, which in the long run will likely be done by a new manager of planning, but just to ensure that county council is receiving regular annual updates on the progress of the implementation of some of the goals and objectives of the plan. With that, I know that I've just giving you guys a lot there, but I tried to move as quickly as possible and to try to hit some of the key highlights of the plan. But with that, I certainly turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair, and I'm certainly happy to field any questions or comments. The objective again today, as I've noted, as Mr. Lima had noted, is we're looking for committee's endorsement of this draft official plan, and I would want to stress draft official plan, because subsequently this will go back out to the public and it'll go back out to the local municipalities, provincial ministries, other statutory bodies to provide us comment and feedback. And then we begin that kind of iterative process of identifying changes that are needed to the document and returning it back to committee for further consideration.
Well, thank you, Paul, for that. I'm going to turn it over to committee members. Do you have any specific questions for Paul at this time? Grant?
Thank you, Orton. Paul, you mentioned about the 25% target for affordable housing. And you said that a number that we should be talking about a little bit. It's something definitely Southwold has talked about. Trying to save agricultural land is paramount to most rural communities. And I think 25% personally, from my point, is light. When we're trying to intensify our developments to save money, for one thing, to make it more affordable, and then make the servicing more affordable, 25% target, I wouldn't mind seeing it higher personally. And I guess I have another question for Paul regarding Bill 23. I think you've been in a meeting with a developer in our area that's not too agreeable with how Bill 23 is interpreted, I guess, is for lack of a better term. Apparently you will be seeing him again here shortly, hopefully.
We will.
You know who I'm talking about, so.
I do.
What is the correct interpretation of a boundary for a settlement area? Is there even a boundary now, since I've been kind of told by certain individuals that settlement boundaries don't really exist any longer?
Through the chair, I will couch this by saying I am a registered professional planner in the province of Ontario with 20 years of experience working in municipal, provincial, and private sector. And I'd want to make it very unequivocally is my professional planning opinion that Bill 23 did nothing to remove urban boundaries. It did nothing to remove the policies of the provincial policy statement as they relate to protection of agricultural land, as they relate to the process for adjusting or expanding urban boundaries, or the requirement to establish urban boundaries. And if there is an individual that may be proffering an opinion that urban boundaries don't exist, it would be a position that I would strongly disagree with. And I would certainly have no problems stating that in front of them, or stating that in front of the Ontario Land Tribunal, or to County Council, or to anybody in that regard. I know that Bill 23 definitely introduced an element of confusion about perhaps some of the priorities that the province of Ontario had. One of the things that we've tried to communicate to individuals that come in and say, well, Bill 23 means that, we've got to open up the floodgates and housing at all costs. We have always reiterated back to those individuals, and there are multiple people that have come in with that impression, is that the provincial policy statement and its requirements for intensification, for the protection of agricultural lands, the protection of natural areas, those policies still do very much exist. The one thing that we have tried to do in this new official plan with respect to what are called conceptual urban boundaries, and this is something that Southwold's official plan has, is there's two ways that our urban boundaries are often drawn. Is they're drawn quite exactly, and we have the technology to do that using mapping systems to draw a very irregular or very precise urban boundary. In some cases, we're not really sure exactly where that boundary should sit. So we develop kind of a conceptual or very smooth line around the urban boundary of a municipality that would allow individual developers, when they come in with applications, to refine that boundary. And the real crux of this, from my position as an urban planner, is there's nothing wrong with refining that urban boundary. And that may be different than the conceptual boundary that you will see in a local official plan. But that refinement of that urban boundary should not be facilitating an expansion of that urban boundary. So if the interior, that urban area has an area of 50 hectares, refining that urban boundary shouldn't add an additional 10 hectares to that boundary. At the end of the day, when we refine that urban boundary, we should still be left with an urban area that is 50 hectares in size. And so I know there has been some confusion over that. That's my position on it. So we have it, and to that end, so we try to introduce some greater clarity around how we treat these conceptual urban boundaries that exist in municipalities like Southwold. And Southwold is not the only municipality out there that has these. There is nothing wrong with the conceptual urban boundary, but we just wanted to clarify how they would be and should be interpreted.
Thank you for that.
Yes, any other questions for Paul? Okay, and I know, Grant, you and I are probably going to have a chat on the 25% rule. It's disturbing, actually, when you hear some statistics about 50% of Elgin residents fall within the threshold of needing affordable housing. And yet we would be setting an official plan targeting 25%. I get that. And I think there's a trade-off to be had as well. If we set up a higher target, are we lowering the potential value in the area? You know what I'm getting at? There's a trade-off here.
You know, there's, if you go to North London, Sunningdale, and you see a lot of row houses, very beautifully done. There's, you know, they look very nice. They aren't that more expensive to build than a plain Jane one. They dress them up, they look nice, the neighborhood looks nice. There are ways of doing it, and Southwold with our one, the 𝗔𝗶𝗄 property that we went out for RFP with, we own the land, and we put in the RFP that there will be high density, there will be medium density, and there will be possibly single detached condos for retired people. So we dictated what we wanted in that plan for that property to ensure that we got a higher target than 25%. And the concepts we've seen so far look great. It isn't done in stone yet, but what we've seen so far, the developers really excited about this too. So I don't like. Some people see row houses being pretty blasé, and 20 years may not look near as nice. I think there are ways of dealing with that will keep the community very happy over the duration of those buildings.
Thank you for your comments. Paul, setting a target of affordable housing or something within an official plan, I think it's an admirable goal. I know that often our own planning tech back in our own little community would argue, well, that's great. How do we enforce it? How does this official plan give any teeth to the municipality to enforce that you can have meet certain affordable housing targets?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. It's a great question, and it's a question that often municipalities, whether you're at an upper or lower tier level in Ontario, struggle with, and have struggled with for a number of years. The way that we've attempted to tackle this issue within the local official plan is, quite frankly, to put it back on the development industry and the developer to demonstrate. And so we've introduced a new requirement to say, aside from just please meet a 25% affordable housing target, which again is usually the bare minimum that the province requires a municipality to establish in their official plan, is to require two things. One, the development industry to, when they are submitting a plan, to rationalize that and provide an explanation to the county and to the local municipality as to how they're achieving that target. So it is incumbent on that applicant to demonstrate how they will be doing that, not just that they think they're going to, or we aspire to achieving that. So we've outlined steps to require the development industry to demonstrate that. The second is we've also introduced those steps, as I had mentioned, about annual reporting to county council on a number of these different factors. So it would be using, the county would then be starting to track affordability and report back onto a regular basis to understand if we need to start to introduce additional programming that might be, community improvement planning. It might be applying for federal or provincial grants for the creation of affordable housing, but we can start to tweak that program by starting to at least introduce more regular reporting of it. So the county can start to keep track if we are actually achieving that target, if we're way off on our target. And to be quite honest with you, and I'm going to say this at a very kind of like hypothetical level, at this exact moment in time, we don't know whether or not we're even achieving that target. For all we know, we might be achieving that target in Elgin County. And again, I say that at a very hypothetical level. It wouldn't be my suspicion, but we're not even beginning to track that. So we're tackling this by requiring developers and the development industry to demonstrate how they're helping us achieve our target. And we're doing more regular reporting on it in terms of annual reporting to county council. And so that's how this would be achieved. I think often and that's how it's proposed to be achieved, I should say. I think quite often some of the concern that comes in on achieving an affordable housing target is we get very caught up on the metric of what the threshold is for affordable housing. It's a threshold, a number, when there is a number that exists out there for Elgin County this year, a certain dollar value that changes year to year. So we do want to also advise the development industry of what that threshold is, so they also have a clear indication of how they can achieve that target. But quite often we find our planning departments get really caught up in, well, how am I supposed to approach a developer to, and mandate that they provide us with a list of all the homes they're going to build and the price points for each individual model. And I would suggest it's likely the wrong way that we approach that. And as long as we're requiring the development industry to demonstrate how they're going to achieve that, help us achieve that goal, and report regularly to county council on it and tweak our policies and programming, I'd suggest that's the best way that we could move forward with implementing that target, would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you for that. Does anyone have any further questions for Paul? Donna, have you got anything at this time?
Yes, I would just like to say, I haven't read it all, but I did appreciate the quick overview. And I'm very happy to see that there's an ag systems approach mentioned in the OP. I know that it's only been in the Greenbelt area, and I feel that we desperately do need it for province. Makes sense, it increases clarity. Because agriculture is more than just a farm, it's all those processes and systems of transportation to markets, of laborers, of manure, of those auxiliary things that we have producing or using on the farm. And we need to know that the transportation corridor is safe and protect agricultural, et cetera. So I'm very happy to see that that's in the OP.
Thank you for those comments. Grant, have you got anything additional at this point? Mark?
Just a question with the affordable housing, you'd almost have to have full services, wouldn't you? Because you can't, put high intensity on no services. I think that's one struggle our township has. We don't have full services. Is that correct?
Through the chair, you're 100% correct. It's not to say that higher density development can never be built on private services. We do see it in these really, really rare instances where it may be appropriate, but the general rule of thumb is that if we're looking at anything over a single detached dwelling, we are really looking at full services. Is kind of like the safe way to approach it. There is some, and I never, it's always the risk that you kind of oversimplify any explanations around that. but there are additional policies related to servicing and also related to waiving kind of, you know, intensification requirements if the services aren't there to support it. So we have tried to strike that balance, that we're not trying to put undue burden on a local municipality or a developer who comes in through the door and wants to develop on private or partial services to try to force a density target down that it's just not practically feasible from an engineering perspective to achieve. So we have tried to introduce those policies to make sure there's some balance in that as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Paul, can I take you to section 8.5? Under the plan, it's new and improved county roads. And specifically, it's page 34 of the draft plan, or 35.
Certainly. I am almost there. I'm on page 35.
Okay, I was reading it last night and I ran across a sentence which I found rather interesting and maybe I get some clarification on. It's on page 35, second paragraph, and it begins with, in addition to the road right of way. But what I'm interested in is the last sentence. It says, where additional land is required for intersection improvement, such land shall be dedicated to county at no expense. Really?
And so so when we were referring to this policy is dealing with increasing road widths or increasing a right of way and taking a land dedication for road widening purposes. So this is an existing policy that already does exist in the existing county official plan. And it's simply to reiterate that land dedications, when they do occur, whether they be at the county or local level, the standard process in Ontario, at least from my experience, is that land is dedicated over at no cost to the road authority, whether that be the county or the local municipality. So the strips of land that would be taken off a front to accommodate an increased right of way or turning a site triangle are dedicated over at no cost. I would put forward that in my experience is the standard process in development review in any of the municipalities that I've worked in. And again, it's not a change from the existing policy, but I'm certainly happy to take any of that feedback back and if you'd like me to and re-examine that.
Not necessarily if that's the adopted policy, but the way I read it, I thought if the county's coming and looking for additional land for an intersection or something, and if it happens to be on private land, is that the expectation?
Okay. Pardon me, Mr. Chair. I think I understand a bit more clearly. So in this case, the policy isn't there to suggest that the county can come out of nowhere and one day say, well, we're looking for additional land and you're going to give us this additional land at no cost. The trigger always for a land dedication for road widening purposes or reconfiguration of the road is always a Planning Act application. So it's not to say that the county can, so if the county wanted to, and again, Mr. Lima might be even better positioned to field this question, but it's always been in my experience that if a county wanted to develop a new road and this new road was going to go right through the middle of private property, that the county has to go through a normal process of approaching that landowner to take that land and pay fair market value. There are the Expropriation Act exists for a reason if those negotiations fall flat. If we're talking about a development proposal that's come in through the door, which is probably the primary way that most municipalities will take a road widening through the development process, a plan of subdivision, plan of condominium, a consent application, that's when the road dedication comes at no cost to the county. Outside of any Planning Act approval, that road dedication, the land that would be dedicated over for a road would go through a normal willing buyer, willing purchaser process. And if that fell flat, would go through an expropriation process. But I always caution that I am not a road authority, Mr. Chair. So I'm not sure if Mr. Lima might have more to add to that or greater clarity.
No, I think you've explained it very well. It's just simply a case of when I read over that sentence last night, I thought, really? Are you kidding me? So thank you for the clarification on that. And I just picked that up. If maybe someone else picks it up, there might be some explanation needed with the plan.
I certainly, just to build on that, Mr. Chair, I'm certainly happy to revisit the wording around that if it does need some more clarity, because again, one of the primary focuses of this review was wanting to make sure that we had a clear, accessible and readable official plan. So if there's any fuzziness about the intention of that, I will very happily revisit that to make sure that that's clear to the reader.
Thank you for that, Paul. Again, it's simply, I expect through a technical review and probably through the public process, you might get some questions on it. Which brings to mind the next question, which deals with section 8.15 on page 39, talks about servicing and settlement areas in the rural area. And I agree, the county does not maintain a sanitary sewer or water system. However, that's not necessarily true. We do have a sanitary water system.
I'm happy to certainly to review that. That's actually that particular wording is existing wording from the official plan from 2011. And you please forgive me if I've got my facts wrong on that. So if that's incorrect, I'm certainly happy to revisit that.
Well, you are correct within settlement areas. We do not. But if someone was to take this literal, we do. Just a little clarification.
Okay.
I'm just, again, if I can read that, someone less educated than I, or even better educated than I, would read it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, that's all I've got, other than a couple of misplaced articles, but I'm sure they'll come out in the review as well. Yes, Grant, please.
I do remember something about that being brought up the last time we looked at the official plan. I can't remember what the explanation was. They left it, obviously, but for life of me, I can't remember what the discussion ended up being reasoning for.
Well, I suspect that it's because if we're talking about within settlement areas, you're right, we don't. But we do happen to have that infrastructure, and it's just trying to lend credibility to the plan. That's all.
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, I would argue that the county's wastewater treatment collection system does not service settlement community limits, as you well know. But we can certainly circle back. Mr. Hicks and I will review this and see if we can enhance the language and make it a little bit more clear if required.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything specific? And again, we're going to have a little bit of time here to probably review the plan over the next coming months. But if there isn't any further for today, okay. Everybody's satisfied at this point? Okay. Jenna, have you got a motion for us?
I do. Be it resolved that the committee endorse the draft Elgin County official plan, and that staff be directed to begin the technical circulation and public posting of the draft official plan, and that following the technical circulation and public posting of the draft official plan, staff be directed to submit the draft Elgin County official plan incorporating feedback received through technical circulation and public posting for county council's review at a future meeting.
Having heard the motion, is anyone interested in moving and seconding that? Okay, Councillor Jones will move. Anyone interested in seconding? Councillor Widner? All in favor? Okay, all hands are up. Good, it's carried. Thank you. We don't have any other business. We don't have any correspondence. Do we need to set the date for the next meeting, or at the call of the chair?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to committee members, perhaps my recommendation would be we see how quickly we get your responses back for the grant submissions and your subsequent review, and then work with the chair on sending out a doodle poll or some meeting date alternatives to ensure that Donna is able to attend as well. So at the call of the chair, long story short.
Okay, thank you for that. Which brings us to the adjournment motion.
Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 2:54 p.m. to meet again at the call of the chair.
Mover and seconder, Councillor Widner. Donna will second. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone. Certainly enjoyed the kickoff meeting and it was a big day. So we'll see you soon. Enjoy your homework.